Okay, it says we are live. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the April 6th edition of Cultivating Connections in the time of COVID. We're kind of flipping around the roles today. I will be moderating, and today Amanda, our communications director, will be talking about the soon-to-be-released issue of Good Day magazine. The file was just sent to the printer this morning for our first issue of 2020, so really exciting. A little introduction. I'm Joe Stefenoni, membership director for the National Grange, and with me today is Amanda Brozana-Rios, director of communications for the National Grange. Amanda sent me a preview of the Good Day magazine this morning, and I have to say this is going to be an exciting issue. I know Amanda's been doing as much as she can to get as much of the most up-to-date information on this recent development as we can. So we're looking through the article, there's information, there's an essay on connectivity challenges in rural America, what the FCC is doing to expand access to broadband during this lockdown, but also Grange-focused things like new resources available for Granges selfishly from the membership department, but also there's a new Junior Grange passport about the American flag, and also a recap of the Washington, D.C. experience. So I won't get too far into it. We'll let Amanda cover it. So Amanda, what can we look forward to in this first issue of Good Day for 2020?
Hey, Joe. First of all, you're doing a great job hosting, so I might be able to slough off this responsibility every once in a while.
I have big shoes to fill.
Thanks. So, yeah, this is a really exciting issue. It's exciting in part because I kind of got to work back to the journalistic roots. For those of you who don't know me or any of my background, I originally started in newspapers working as a reporter when I was 14. So to have something that totally changes what you're going to focus on and what the stories are going to be is not really anything new for journalists, but it's definitely not something you typically deal with too often in content magazines like ours, because you typically have a plan, a couple months or even a year out for what that major piece is going to be and some of the elements around it. So this time we tore apart the magazine just a couple weeks ago and rebuilt a whole bunch of it in order to focus on what's going on, but really give you a good idea of what our Granges are doing in response to this, because the amount of things and the diversity of the projects is really, really incredible. And you're on mute, buddy.
Have to get used to that. Circling back, since I am moderating today, feel free, send in your questions, either comment on our live video on Facebook. You can message the National Grange on Facebook, or if you'd like to keep it anonymous, you can email me, membership@nationalgrange.org, and I will do my best to get your questions funneled to Amanda. So going back to the content of the magazine, can you talk a little bit about what the main feature is for this issue?
Yeah, so originally, one of the stories that we reduced quite a bit was going to be our main story, and that was about that barn quilt idea that, there's a lot of Granges out there with barn quilts or barn quilt trails, and clearly that just didn't feel like the right focus. So we switched to look at rural health and really look at the whole spectrum of rural health, not just rural health now, although obviously there's quite a bit of information there, but also on rural health in general, and where the struggles are from the individual level of research that shows us that people in rural areas are less, they move and are less active. They move less and are less active. So there's an obesity issue that is more startling in rural America. There are other health concerns that are heightened in rural settings. There's more smoking, there's less wearing seatbelts, things like that. and then looking at some of the things that we've talked about as, you know, areas of concern, like the healthcare provider shortage. You know, some of the statistics that are in there, when I was doing some of the research, was really frightening. In rural communities, there's, 1.3 providers per every 10,000 people. And 84% of rural communities have no mental health professional in that county. That is incredible to me. 61%, I believe it is, have no OBGYN service in their county. And I mean, if you think 3 out of 4 women have children at some point in their childbearing years, that's an incredible amount of rural women who are traveling a great distance in order to have basic care checkups, and then obviously to have a child. So things like that were just startling. And then we looked at the rural health or hospital closure crisis that's been going on. I mean, we talk about it as a recent thing because they've been tracking numbers since 2005. But I went back and found different studies that show this was happening in mass in the 80s and the 90s. So we've been losing rural hospitals and rural beds in hospital facilities for a long, long time. We looked at telehealth and some of the barriers, specifically connectivity. I mean, if you're not joining us here, you're probably not doing it because you don't have great connectivity, but that also means that you can't access health services that at this moment are really vital to do through telephone. If it's just a basic checkup or basic check-in with your provider that you can do by phone or by appointment that requires some type of especially video communication like this. And we looked at one thing that was really interesting to me was the number of flights that originate out of rural communities for air medical services. It's about 75% of all flights come out of rural areas. And in some communities or some states like Nebraska, 100% of air medical flights originate in rural communities. But right now there's surprise billing, which Burton, our legislative director, has been working on that issue a lot. He's been talking a lot about, and those flights can run you tens of thousands of dollars that your insurance does not cover. So, I mean, that's a healthcare gap right there. So there's just a lot of information. And then we turned on its head and looked at what's happening now. Why are rural communities more susceptible? How did these already big factors play into what rural health will look like when dealing with COVID? And then, doing the basic care for our communities, like making sure that there's hand sanitizer stations in places, making sure that people have masks, making sure that people who are our neighbors get taken care of and don't have to leave their house if they are at risk. That's what Granges are doing to pick up and make sure that they're alleviating some of the stress on that already fragile rural healthcare system.
And you touched briefly on telehealth, and that leads perfectly into that discussion on connectivity. But shifting gears slightly, the Grange has always been a great supporter of both rural infrastructure improvement, but also education. One of the first features in the magazine for this upcoming issue is what I'm assuming is a guest essay focusing on why connectivity is important for students. Can you give a little bit of a preview about that piece in the magazine?
Yeah, so this is actually one of my favorite pieces. It came in a couple months ago. It was submitted by an FFA student from Indiana. He's the vice president of the FFA there. And he is working right now after his freshman year in college, or during his freshman year in college, to put together their state convention at the FFA level or at the FFA. And so he had submitted this because it was one of the speeches that he had done that he adapted. And when I saw that we're all going online for different things, including education, I was able to reach out with him and say, can you provide a postscript? Because now we're not just talking the theoretical of what the barriers are and how hard this access is, but we're talking about you're living that, and you have the observations and the knowledge that you can apply it to what students are being faced with, what families are being faced with. And he provided that postscript, which I think is really awesome addition. And Joe, you were on the call this morning where Burton mentioned that 40 miles, by distance outside of Washington, D.C., there's a county in Virginia that is setting up hotspots at basically what are rideshare parking lots, because 40 miles outside of Washington, D.C., students in that county struggle with access. So, rural isn't always so far flung. It isn't always West Virginia or Wyoming. It can be just right outside of the nation's capital.
And that's a perfect example. And what Burton shared this morning was those areas are really focusing on how to get more hotspots like that set up so these kids can come do their homework. Kind of stepping away from the connectivity and the rural healthcare, where a new junior passport is being rolled out in this edition of the magazine. Looking at the preview you sent me, it says American flag is focus of new 5-star passport. So can you talk a little bit about the junior passport program? Well, I know that's Sam's domain, but a little bit about the junior passport program and what this passport is, and then why this would be a good time to start working on the passports for juniors and non-juniors.
Yeah, actually, I think that's one of the fun parts of that program is that you certainly obviously want the juniors to do this, but you could literally do this as a 75-year-old adult and really enjoy learning something new. For most of us, the American flag is not new, but certainly the way that we approached it with the passport is, I was fortunate enough by Sam to be asked to write this. So the passport program is something set up for the junior Grangers specifically, but again, accessible for anybody, that has ways that it's trying to teach certain things. We used to have the badge program, and there were, the badges that you would sew or iron on. They moved to pins, or they became pins. And then now it's evolved into this passport program. So it's a couple sheets of paper that have directives on it, including learning objectives. So for people who are homeschooling and they're looking for things that they can give their kids that meet certain standards that they're required to do, it has some of that language written out, which I really like. And it tells you how easy or difficult it is based on that star system. So 1 through 5. And the American flag could easily be a 1, right? What colors are on the American flag? How many stars? How many stripes? Why are they there? But we wanted to take it a step further and really make sure that when people approach this passport, they gained not just, a knowledge of the very basics of the flag, but a real true understanding of the flag in our culture, some of the ways in which we, approach it, or whatever through our flag code, some of its history. And then hopefully that's not just making them aware of what the flag is and what it should look like, but it's making them really passionate citizens about respecting the flag, and passionate Grangers about that, because there's a section of this which I think some of the Grangers will find interesting, where we ask the juniors to sit in every role that where the flag is basically touched or used in that role in some way in a subordinate Grange meeting. So granted, Joe, you would have never been serious in your Grange, as wonderful as you are. Nobody would have elected you to that position. But even if you're a boy who's in the junior Grange program, we ask you to sit through that role, even for a few minutes, because you understand what it is to carry the flag, make sure it's not falling to the floor, make sure that you're doing it with dignity, that type of thing. Because I think that that's important even for the young boys in the room who will never be serious, maybe, to watch how that's presented and make sure that they're providing it appropriate respect, when it is presented by the series in their Grange.
And you hit the nail on the head that you don't have to be a junior to do this. So for those of you who have kids or grandkids at home or know someone who does, please feel free to share the passports with them. The current ones are on the National Junior Grange website. And then once you get your magazine, you can share this one as well. I want to focus on the big picture of Good Day for a little bit. Can you talk about a little bit of the background of how Good Day came into being, how long it's been in existence, where we're at now, and then what you would like to see Good Day evolve into in the future?
Yeah, so in 2016, after I'd come back on board with National Grange, Betsy and I had talked quite a bit about the idea of having a national magazine, especially a quarterly one, because we do have a smaller staff, and it is quite an undertaking to do a quality publication, which is exactly what this was supposed to be from the very outset. We heard a lot of folks who were saying, okay, well, maybe it's going to be a couple pages stapled together, photocopied. And we had to, assure people that they were going to be spending, it's a $16 subscription for the year. They were going to be spending $16 for a quality magazine. So the smallest issues we've ever had are 68 pages. One example is this one, which covered Grange revival and had passports in it and had op-eds, looked at different things that Granges were doing around the country, looked at the history of some Granges, and included an English, Spanish side-by-side translation of the welcoming ceremony, for example. So there's membership tools in almost every one of these issues as well that you're finding, and you're not having to print from our site, but you're also finding content that you wouldn't find anywhere else, which was a big key of this as well. So in 2017, February, we launched with our first issue. It was 96 pages, and it looked at family traditions, and that kind of kicked us off with a tone that was conversational, but informative. And that's been really one of the keys. The other thing is the only advertising really that happens in this magazine, it's important, I think, to me that be knowledge base and not just, an ad for a new hair care product or something like that. With our smaller subscription base, we wouldn't be getting those major, Fructis and whatever beauty product advertising anyway. But even if we get to that point, it's important, I think, that the ads that we have provide value, because I know that I subscribe to magazines physically, and I get them, and I realize that 60% of the pages are either ads or advertorials, which are, content that's produced really by somebody who's paid them to have that content there. And I hate that. I mean, because if I wanted to pay for advertising, I don't know where I'd go, but I'd pay for advertising somewhere else. And so that's really important that this magazine be basically cover to cover content that you can use in some way. Even those partner ads that we do, they're informational in some way, shape, or form. And I know that, initially we had set the target of 2,000 subscriptions in the first year, 3,000 by the second. Having that price point of the magazine, originally at 14, we didn't get the original 2,000. And so we moved it to a $16 price point. We've kept it at that, and we'll keep it at that. But that idea of the 2,000 subscribers is based on one per each Grange. And then obviously some of the more connected members, state membership directors, state junior directors, state leaders that should be getting kind of a copy of their own to be going through and working content out of those for programming and stuff. So we're still under that, but we are definitely much more financially sound than I think we originally thought we might be if we had fewer subscriptions. So I know that there's been some concern of whether or not this publication was going to continue, and some people thought, maybe I shouldn't renew. I'm going to stop getting it. I won't get what I paid for. That's not the case. This has been well received in Grange community, and Grange Advocacy, which is our partner organization for a lot of this, has done a lot to step up. Grange Advocacy is our 501c4 related. And so when they have partners who have issues that are based on our policy, things that we care about and our members have already said that they want us to advocate on, they're pushing them over to become some of those content providers, as well as far as the advertorials, those one-page ads that are informative. So we do have a really good, at this point, financial footing. So if you haven't subscribed, you definitely should. It's really easy. It's on the National Grange website. You can mail a check for $16 and say, I want this to go to Good Day. And as long as you have the correct name and address on that check, you should be able to get it. We have lots and lots of ways. There's people in every one of the states, theoretically, who should be able to take a subscription, send it in for you. So yeah, so it's a pretty great publication. It makes me pull my hair out 4 times a year and pull a couple all-nighters, but I really enjoy what we get to put in our members' hands. I think it's useful. So,
Well,
and I'd love to take suggestions and questions from some of our audience too.
This is an editorial comment from where I sit. It's not only a great publication for our members, it's a great tool for membership recruitment as well, because it does balance not only that direct Grange information, but also just that general interest, those general interest pieces that are eye-catching and appealing to those who aren't yet members. So, thank you for making that balance. Where would you like to see Good Day move in the next few years? How will it evolve?
So I will be very honest that I don't know if we evolve too terribly much in certain ways that I would like, just based on the fact that we do have a small staff. We have, we have fewer Granges that are participating with content that's what I would consider viable content. I kind of want to talk about that in a little bit. I know you have that on the list of what we look for as far as submissions. But I honestly, ideally, I've looked back. I mean, this quarterly magazine is based off the idea that we used to have a Grange quarterly, but we used to also have a Grange monthly. I think that's way too much to shoot for, but it would be really neat to have 5 or 6 issues instead of 4 a year, because there is so much going on in our Granges across the country that I would love to put in this, because I think, just like you said, if you're approaching this as a person who hasn't yet joined, like my mom, who is, just on the cusp of membership based on what she reads on this, you're learning about everything that the Grange experience could be for you. And you're figuring out that if your Grange may not do that thing, that you certainly could, or that, there's the ability to start a Grange, to do some of those things. So I think it's important to have a variety of content from a variety of Granges, and not just the same old Grange. I mean, I'm in Valley Grange in Pennsylvania here. We're awesome. We got 125 members, we got a giant treasury because we have one of the most amazing partnerships with the PA Dairymen that brings in $100,000 a year from serving milkshakes at our Pennsylvania farm show. It's an incredible operation. We put a lot of that money back into obviously keeping the operation going, and then a ton of it back into the community. But it would be really unfair if every issue you heard about what Valley Grange was doing, because the reality of your Grange is probably not Valley Grange. That's the reality of almost no Granges that I know. But beyond that, you would also get really sick of hearing about them. So trying to balance getting the content from our local Granges, all 1,700 of them, and what they're doing, and making sure that we don't get too repetitive. We've had a lot of Granges who take part in Quilts of Valor, for example. And when we get stories about Quilts of Valor, I mean, they're all kind of the same. They're extremely important. Everybody should be doing them. I love veterans. I love quilts. It sounds perfect. But it would be really hard to read the same basic article with new names every issue. So we don't put those in every time, so finding the new and innovative things that Granges are doing is important. So, getting content from Granges that do different types of things, but still getting that information about if you gave a Quilt of Valor presentation, because at some point I come around and I wrap those together and I say, oh, there's a whole contingent of Vietnam veterans that are getting these quilts from our Granges, or there's a whole contingent of women veterans or something, and try and do short stories on that. So, so all that content's really, really valuable, but it's just having the patience that it will appear, and having the persistence in providing it.
So before we dive in a little deeper on that topic of viable content, one comment and one question have come in on the Facebook side of things. The question comes from Loretta Washington, our Sales Programs, Benefits, Services, and many other things director at the national office. When will subscribers, when can they expect to have the next issue in their mailboxes?
Yeah, so we expected to hopefully be in early April. It's now later April, so it should be about the third week of April that our subscribers will begin receiving it. I know based on where we publish out of and based on where it mails out of, the Mid-Atlantic region here and some of the like Illinois, Ohio area gets it first. So that third week of April, you should be receiving that. And then if you're in a farther flung area, or especially you have a rural PO or something like that, you'll probably be getting it the last week of April. I should mention, Joe, that's a really good question because a lot of people will miss an issue and then maybe miss another one. And we'll never know because we don't know what comes in your mailbox. And they wouldn't know exactly when to look for it. And so we'll never know that they've missed something until a year later when we see them at some event and they say, man, I subscribed to that, but I just never get it. It's like, well, boy, you need to report that to us so that we can make sure to take care of that. Let our mail house know that we're having a problem, replace the issue for you, do what we need. So it's a good question from Loretta for process too. If you don't get this by, first, second week of May, you should be calling one of us. And at this point, I think we're pretty accessible.
Absolutely. The comment was from Susie Ram of Oregon. She said it would be helpful if there was a schedule for submissions available about 6 to 8 weeks out.
Yeah, so we have kind of put in the front of the magazine, it's on page 3. Well, it's really page 1. So this is the cover. And then the first page that you get to that has the table of contents. It does have the press dates when it hits mailboxes and when things are due. But those are just the guidelines as far as the content being due, not per se the guidelines about what the content should be. So Susie, that's a really good suggestion. I know I've gotten content from you before that's been really useful. We've been able to run. So that's something that I can work towards.
And speaking of content, that leads perfectly into a discussion about what is viable content. And for those Grangers out there looking to write something, either a guest editorial, an essay, op-ed, or just covering what their Grange is doing, what is viable content from your seat as editor?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, it's important that the content come in and be timely. I mean, that's, I think, my biggest area that I struggle with. If you gave a Quilt of Valor, for example, in November, and you get me that article in April, it's really hard for me with a quarterly magazine to put that in somebody's hand in July because it's almost a full year since it's been done. That doesn't mean that never happens, certainly. And again, it doesn't mean that I won't tuck that away to hopefully use that content in something later. But certainly, as you do something, try and turn that story around to us pretty quickly. The other thing is you don't have to be a great writer. You don't have to even have written much of anything up yourself. If you got local press attention for something that you did, for example, a Grange in Maine found out that one of their pre-juniors, a turning 3-year-old boy, was not going to have a birthday party because of this COVID crisis. So they decided to have a parade with cars, and they, paraded past his house and waved to him and, gave the well wishes as best you can at this time. And they got press attention in Maine for that. And so finding that on Facebook was great. It would have been so much better if I had another week with that content. If you just send me a link to something that, was included in a local press outlet, typically I'm able to either message the person who wrote or provided that and see if we can reprint it, or I'm able to repackage it and rewrite it. And so that's very, very helpful. But if you're writing something, again, you don't have to be perfect in spelling or grammar or anything like that. But if it's very, very difficult to understand what is happening in that story, that's been a problem. The other thing is for viable content, making sure to provide some contact information is really important, because if I receive something in the mail, especially without any other contact information than a mailing address, that's very difficult to get back to that person and ask for clarification, to know what that story really can develop into. And one of the other areas that's really important as far as some of the news content is that it comes with photos, because this is a magazine. So having pages and pages of just black and white, black text on white paper is not attractive. It really hurts the eyes. And so it's really important to have good photos, and good photos in this case, one, they're digital. So they've been taken on a cell phone camera, they've been taken on a digital camera, and they've been sent in at their highest quality. Because if it's something, what we call DPI, dots per inch, under 300, when I put it on page and size it to where it's going to be, it comes out looking really grainy, and you're going to say, boy, this magazine isn't really worth it. The pictures are not that great. So it's really important to have high quality photos that you submit digitally with some of that stuff, because it's hard to run a story without having some of those. And then you ask about editorial stuff. And I'll tell you that a lot of times I kind of know where the main story is going, or the major part of that content, that issue. And I like two things. I like something either completely different to offer a little balance, or I like something that touches on the same themes. So when we were looking at the quilt block trail, we were looking at Americana, at heritage, at culture. So I was looking for content that had something to do with any of that. But if you have a submission that you want to talk a little bit about your favorite memory in Grange, I bet you that resonates with a lot of other people out there, and those are things that are viable. Of course, we only get to put a couple of those in an issue, so certainly there's some picking and choosing to do. But if you submit something to your state for your creative writing contest, that's something I'm looking for. A poem to your poetry contest, or just you did a poem in general, because we have a hobbies section that we try and put that type of stuff in. If you have a suggestion for a great book that you read that you thought would be really applicable to most Grange members for some reason, email me and let me know, and I'll see what's kind of coming up and give you some guidance for that. One of the biggest things is if you just say, hey, I think I might have this idea, can you give me some guidance? I'm able to package some of that. The last thing is, when it comes to op-eds, those essays, typically 500 words is what we're looking for. Can go a little more, can go a little less. Most people who know me, I like to say, write it until you've written it out. But for the longer or the news stories, they may only be 200 words and they may be 1,200 words. It just depends exactly on what the content is. So I always say give me more than less, because I can chop things apart. But it's a fun process too, to work with people who are writing something that they want to see appear, because they're excited and I'm excited to tell those stories. And hopefully we're also learning from each other a little bit. I'm learning more about what Granges look like in communities. You're learning more about what editors' decisions are looking like at your local publications, because they're very similar.
Going back to the topic of images and pictures, Susie Ram from Oregon asked, what size do you need them to be? You did say less than 300 comes out grainy. Is there more specific in terms of a DPI or a file size?
Yeah, so this is getting kind of technical, and I know that there's going to be a lot of people out there where this is way over their heads. So bear with me, okay? I'll give an example. I pulled a couple of these here. So this one that I held up earlier, this had the mountain range in the background and everything, but what I was really trying to get was Joe Fryman's feet here, because we had dubbed this event as Grange with your feet up, right? And so I had taken this picture that was much bigger, and I kept dragging it and making it larger. And as I was making it larger, this was as much of his feet as I could get in here as possible, because after I got past a certain point, while it was originally, a very large, like 5.7 megabyte photo or something like that, it came off my iPhone 11, or I guess my iPhone 8 at the time. So that has a great camera. Most of the smartphones today have them, that are really wonderful for what we need. If you take a photo on your phone and you text it to me, or you email it to me, that's typically large enough. But if I, for example, use it as a full page, or if I'm trying to get maybe very specific in on it and I have to keep dragging it, it can reduce that quality a lot. So the best thing is to have a good camera, good quality camera. And then the second part is, if you're submitting something, try and submit it as large as you possibly got it, which does mean that sometimes it's a 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 megabyte photo. Our servers for @National Grange emails will only take up to a 10 megabyte total file size. So if you had, let's say, 3 photos you were trying to submit that were all 5 or 6 megabytes, that email is going to get bounced back to you. And you're going to say, what in the world? She must have quit. I promise I didn't. It's just that, we have that limit for a reason. So sometimes I've given people like my Gmail address that takes up to 25 megabytes. But the biggest thing I would say is take the best quality photo you can, and then send it to me in that original file, because that original file should be large enough that I can use it even for a full page photo. And when you're thinking about your photo, think a little bit about the composition. What am I going to be focusing on based on the story? So if it's about a seed swap and you get a whole landscape of your Grange in the background and plants out all over the place, and in the photo you mentioned that the mayor had even come by and gotten seeds at your seed swap, and you've got a person from your Grange talking to your mayor, I'm probably going to cut out almost all of your Grange haul and almost all of those extra plants and things. And I'm going to focus in on that person, the to person contact. I'm not going to look for photos that have, the grip and grin and the smile that's really fake in the lineup photos. But I'm going to look for those action shots, and I'm going to look for the action. And so you're going to want to get in as close to that action as you can, while still giving a little bit of room around it, so that that photo can be giant quality, just great, and there's no way I can't use it. I hope that helps.
And as an aside, for those of you who are joining us that are interested in photography, interested in learning more, I saw on Facebook today that Nikon is offering free online photography classes while we are all shut inside. So if you want to learn more, go find out about that, and you can be a photojournalist for the Good Day magazine.
And we love that. The other thing is, Joe, we don't have a great stock photo that says Grange out there. I mean, in the world, it doesn't exist. So, as you're having a dance at your Grange hall, get creative. I was laying on the floor last year while we were at Grange Revival, taking some photos that were really of boots and legs, clearly doing a line dance. Because I didn't need anybody to know where it was from, or that it was Grange Revival. I just knew one day when I have a story about contra dances happening in Grange halls or line dances, I have a stock photo that I can pull from. So, as you're doing something in your Grange, think about just getting creative with your photography, and get fun angles. That's the other thing. Make sure to, get up high and look down on things, get low and look up on them. They all give perspective, and Nikon classes are going to teach you a lot of that. They would be fantastic for you to take, and we would love to have them. I should mention one other thing about photos. And I know this is like an information dump, but still, make sure you have permission from whomever is in your photo for it to be used on your social media, for it to be sent to your local media outlets, for it to be sent to me, especially if the people in the photo are children. I can't stress enough how important it is for you to get parental permission. Signed is even better, saying that child is allowed to appear, because as a daughter of a cop, I can tell you that there are some times where children shouldn't be seen in photos because maybe there's a problem in the home or former home or whatever, where someone doesn't need to know where that child is located, or anything like that. And so it's a small magazine. It's a small footprint. I know it's easy to just think everything's fine because it's within a Grange setting, but especially if those kids aren't Grangers or the people aren't Grangers, make sure to ask, and let me know that you've asked, because that's one thing that I do kick photos back a lot and say, do you have permission for this? And if they can't say yes, or I can't get in touch with the people, then oftentimes I'm using stock photos that you would much rather see other Grange faces for.
And not to go too far down this path, but there are photo release forms available through the youth and junior programs. Am I correct?
There's a copy in the communications handbook, which is available on the National Grange website. We're coming out with a new edition of that. I'm saying this out loud so it happens. By July, there will be a new edition of that thing that is from 2012 that will have new photo release forms, and the junior and youth department do have some language within their forms when you register for their events that says that you release your child to be photographed, or you as a young adult release your photographs of you. And that's important because you can register for an event and say no to that. So if you do have somebody who says no, you can't include them in a photo that you're going to be sending to me, sending to a local outlet, putting up on Facebook, especially putting up on Facebook.
I saw that Sam Keeter of Oregon asked if you would prefer a PNG or GIF file instead of a JPG or a JPEG, as we know them, and you responded to that in the comment section. JPEGs are preferable, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And then Gloria Montero from Nevada asked if they could submit photos from their Grange's Photo Club.
Yeah, absolutely. Just let your photographer know that you want to submit it and make sure that they're okay with it, and then make sure I have the information. Because the worst thing that can happen, of course, is that I either don't attribute a photo and someone's upset that they weren't given credit, or I attribute it wrong. So please just make sure that you include the information about who took the photo, and especially if you can give a little caption. You know, what was going on in that photo? Was that happening at High Desert Grange? Was that happening at Central Nevada Grange? Was that happening at, some Winnemucca Grange? It's important to know kind of where these things were happening, who was involved in the photo, and that also allows me to work some of the information from the story back into there, or out of the caption into the story.
Well, we haven't got any new comments on the Facebook page, and I haven't had any roll into my inbox. We're coming up on our 1 hour mark. So Amanda, is there any final thought or closing remarks you have about Good Day? And then we'll talk a little bit about the rest of the Cultivating Connections for this week.
Yeah, so just for Good Day, I think that the biggest thing is, if you enjoy this magazine, I hope you share it, and I hope that you encourage other people to get it, because 100 pages, which is what some of our issues are, it's a lot to read, and I can't imagine that if you get a copy for your Grange, and all that's done is it's passed around during your Grange meeting, that anybody's getting a lot of information out of that content. This takes hundreds of hours to put together each quarter. And I would hate to think that those hundreds of hours are wasted, that most of the people that see the magazine don't actually get to read the magazine. It's a $16 investment, which is an investment. But if you have a Grange mentor that especially isn't online, this is a great way to show them your appreciation for their work to get you in the Grange where you are, and for them to keep connected with the organization as we move further and further down this digital rabbit hole that we are in. And I would just say that if there is problems that you have with, either you're finding that your subscription may have lapsed and you weren't sure of it, you're finding that you may not have gotten an issue or anything like that, please let us know as soon as you can. Please ask if you can, confirm when your subscription is due. We're here to help you, and we're here to make sure that you are able to get this product, but we don't know what comes in your email, or I'm sorry, in your mailbox. We don't know that you need to know when to subscribe. So I could just assume that nobody likes it and they don't want to resubscribe. So please, help us help you. And then if you appreciate the magazine, consider letting everyone else know that they can get a subscription as well, how to and where to, and being one of our ambassadors, because we desperately need ambassadors for lots of things in the Grange, and this is certainly one of them. If you like this and you give copies of pages and things to other people and they enjoy it, point out to them that they can subscribe and get this on their own.
And just to wrap up, one, how do people subscribe if they are interested, and can non-members subscribe as well?
Yeah, so anyone can subscribe. It's $16, and you can go online to nationalgrange.org. There's a banner at the top that shows a couple different photos, and the photo that has a man laying and reading a magazine while lounging on a giant hay roll is the one that if you click on, it will lead you to the subscription page. Subscribing online is by far the easiest method, especially for the staff that's making sure that these subscriptions are in and done correctly, which Loretta and Stephanie are goddesses and amazing for getting that done. And so that's the easy method. You can also go under the news tab, and then there's a tab that says Good Day Subscription. You can click there. So it's a couple click throughs, but you'll find it, and we'll put that link up below here. And if you don't subscribe online, that's okay. Inside the magazine, there is a renewal or a subscription form. I believe it's on page 4 of each issue now. And also, every one of your state masters should have subscription cards if you want physical cards. You can also just email myself, Loretta, or Stephanie Wilkins. All of us work on this. It tends to get kicked over to Loretta, who deals with our payments, and Stephanie, who deals with actually keeping the subscription list up. But if you know my email and not theirs, for example, you're welcome to send me that stuff and I'll kick it over to them. sales@nationalgrange.org is Loretta. info@nationalgrange.org is Stephanie. So either of those two can help you as well. And we're always here to do that.
Okay, and finally, can you preview a little bit about what the Cultivating Connections for this week will be?
Yeah, you're going to make me look at my list over there. It's okay, though. So tomorrow, we actually are working on a surprise presenter, so I don't want to talk too much about that. Later this week, Wednesday, we're doing a run through for sign language. We have 2 folks in the Grange, both from New Jersey, who teach or learned sign language and do interpreting because of their Grange connection. And so we're doing a dry run, and we're going to be starting to get up some Grange sign language basic introductory courses here. We also, later in the week, and I'm not sure what day it's going to premiere, we'll have Renee Caldwell, who is from Colorado, who makes the coolest pine needle baskets. And she's put together a brief series of videos that shows how to make those pine needle baskets. And so she's going to come on and talk a little bit about those. We're starting to make sure that we have content, not just, of us talking heads from National Grange, but of people who are out there in the Grange world with amazing skills and talents. One of those is coming on Friday. It's Scott Nicholson from Montana, and he's going to talk about how he got into making balloon animals. And then he'll be a week following or so, he'll be providing an actual lesson. So he'll tell you what you need to have on hand in order to be able to make the balloon animals. And then you'll be able to go online, get some supplies, and then actually make those. And then finally, Thursday, Joan Smith is going to join us and talk a little bit about the foundation. She'll be talking about the foundation's fundraiser t-shirt, the We're All In It Together shirt, which I have right over here. She'll be talking about what the foundation does in general, the deaf grant opportunity that's coming up, and a couple other things like that. So, and then this weekend, we're going to see, we might have another date night in. It depends. So we're working on it.
Well, that sounds great. Everybody should keep a close eye on the National Grange Facebook page to see that schedule, see what times the Cultivating Connections will be at. Amanda, thanks for letting us flip roles for an afternoon and letting me interview you about the new issue of Good Day Magazine. Everybody should be watching their mailboxes in the upcoming weeks to get their issue. If you haven't subscribed, go to the National Grange website or reach out to Loretta or Amanda. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope that you will continue to join in on cultivating connections in the time of COVID.
Thanks, guys. It was great to see you all. Thanks, Joe.